the Delara Dash. Don't need telemetry, don't really care. Forgot about the stupid.
Oh, sorry about that.
Wonderful tire model. And low downforce cars. Get a couple laps in before this damn thing starts.
Not the best place to park.
Don't need telemetry, don't really care. I did one of these before, it was pretty fun. It was a shit show, but it was pretty fun. Forgot about the stupid.
Oh, sorry about that.
Wonderful tire model. Low downforce cars. Yeah, actually the tire model isn't horrific, it's just a couple laps low downforce and stuff
Not
like
the
that.
best place to park.
Not a lot of grip with the low downforce. Tire model does not like to spin or skid or anything like that because it just builds up heat in the entire it was a shit show. Tire carcass. So then you're trying to manage an entire tire carcass that weighs about, or that is about, I don't know. Yeah, actually the tire model isn't horrific. It's 700 degrees or something like that. Maybe not that, about 400 degrees, but it's still a molten cylinder of goo. Not a lot of grip with the low downforce. Tire model does not like to spin or skid or anything like that because it just builds up heat. This ought to be interesting. Come on, full screen mode. No, people ask all the time about the tire model, and old versions of the tire model were horrific. I mean, just bad. But the new tire model 6, 6.5, whatever the heck they're at now. I know the next one's 7. It performs pretty accurately in about, I don't know,
inside, at your door.
90% of the operating regime of the tire. The only major issue is that, or two issues. One, it's very sensitive to track temp. Way more sensitive than a real race car tire is. And then secondly, they don't model just the heat in the contact patch and the entire carcass separately. It's all one. So if you skid the tire, you're just not skidding a contact patch. You're just not building up heat in a contact patch, just a little section of the tire, and then you can just use the rest of the, I don't know, 80% of the tire for grip. When you skid the tire, it spikes the temperature in the entire tire carcass. And it goes up to about 350, 400, maybe even a little more than that. And at that point in time, it's just, like I said, it's just a molten cylinder of goo, and there's absolutely no traction whatsoever. But hopefully they're trying to work on that and whatnot. But, you know, we'll see. Like I said, the way they model the tire is not like Assetto Corsa. It's not like Project Cars. It's not like anything like that, where they just have essentially just a gigantic Excel spreadsheet that says for these conditions, this is how much grip it has. iRacing models, they have what they call an empirical model, which is basically they model the tire
Green.
racetrack
Go
surface
like hell, brother. Go like hell.
interaction on a molecular level. It's groundbreaking, actually, but anything groundbreaking that has been done before, it takes a lot of trial and error. I mean, this service has been around since 2007, I think, so we're at like 10, 11 years. And they're finally getting a tire model that I would say is probably about as
Keep taking, man. Haul
accurate
ass, man. Come on.
feeling as you can if you stay like within the normal operating parameters of the tire. Like if you don't slide it, you should be fine. And even if you do slide it, like you just have to get the car rolling, and then it'll dissipate the heat. Like the heat actually gets pulled out of the tire by the track. I mean, you know, and the air flowing around the tire and everything like that. So they model it at a molecular level. So I give them some slack. You know,
Checker.
it could be like Project Cars. You know, that feels the least organic of a tire that you could possibly find. It does. It feels like a math problem. It feels like 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 3 = 5. It's too much, you know, wheel input. Now that you just lose grip. There's nothing organic feeling about it. It's all very, very analog, or I should say digital, maybe, or analog, whichever. But it just does not feel right. So people give crap to iRacing about the tire model because, you know, most people are perfection now and they're used to these older sims which just have copious amounts of grip. You know, you can basically do anything you want to the car, slide it, skid it, spin it out, everything like that with absolutely virtually no ramifications to doing so. But iRacing is a lot different. So like I said, I give them a lot of credit for what they've done, and it's like one guy doing it. So it's kind of like teaching yourself how to simulate like a NASA space launch and all the variables that go into that. And then you compound the fact that people don't really know how tires work. You know, like the physics behind like tires and slip angles and everything like that, and deformation of sidewalls and everything. Nobody really knows how it works. They just trial and error the crap out of it, and they've kind of just figured out what works and what doesn't. But you can read, I'll probably mispronounce it, Millikan and Millikan, like vehicle stability dynamics or something like that. These two dudes from like, I think they were from like GM or something, I don't know, but they were vehicle dynamicists. And like the first couple chapters of the book, it deals with tires and everything like that, and tire performance and measuring the performance of a tire. And I mean, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of formulas and stuff, but the bottom line is magic. You know, it's kind of like how airplanes fly, you know, like the Bernoulli's principle. It's like, oh, great. How does that work? It just does. It just does. Don't question it. Just propel yourself through the air at 500 miles an hour. Thanks. Well, sitting P9. As you can see, all the gold things here, the DW12. All the rest of us are in the DW old as hell. Okay, let's get this party started. And this is probably one of the first streams that I've done. I'm going to be changing channels just because the channel I have now is just my name, so I changed over to my cool online persona, stuff like that. But that's it's going to be like the Dark Side Racer. It's going to be a separate channel, and hopefully I'll link to it. But I need 100 subscribers just so I can get a permanent link to that live stream. So like whenever that goes live, everything like that. I'm just doing this as a test, just to see how it works and everything like that. I just downloaded an overlay and then fooled around with that for a little bit, so that looks pretty cool. But if you've never seen iRacing or anything like that, this is the garage. And normally everything here has these that you can adjust and everything like that. So when all said and done with, did I miss it? No. When all said and done with, the physics of the car are actually very,
One to go.
well modeled.
I believe it'll be on the inside. Closed.
Believe it or not, I learned
Nice
to set
left
up
there,
cars.
Kenneth.
I learned to set up cars in here, and it drastically trimmed down the learning curve of the real cars.
Yeah, thank you. Nice paint
The
scheme.
vehicle dynamics that you have to deal with in here are the
Thank
exact same
you.
vehicle
I
dynamics
did
you
it
have to deal
myself.
with in the actual race car. You know, the late models and things like that that you fool around with in race. So, when people say this is a game, it's really not. It's a simulation. It's a very in-depth, accurate simulation of how a race car works and what makes it handle and everything like that. So people were surprised whenever I showed up at the track, and I had a decent amount of knowledge. I had no practical knowledge whatsoever in real life, obviously, because I never raced in real life before. But like, as far as like, we could have a conversation about vehicle setups and things like that, and what does what and everything like that. And I already had the theoretical foundation of what does what, and then a basic understanding of what it should feel like in the sim. So it was simply connecting what you saw and felt in the sim to how you feel the seat of the pants feeling. So
Those belts a tug. Get your
once
tires
you make
cleaned off
that
real
connection, everything gets a little bit easier, and things start to really click and make sense. As a matter of fact,
Base cars
Daryl
out. Are
worked
you
on
ready?
probably in the first couple races that I did
Ready.
at
Green, green,
Sands,
green, green.
he said, Guy had no concept of how hard to race these cars, race a stock car into an actual real race. Here we go. So essentially, the best advice I ever got from anybody is drive it so it feels weird. So
Still there at your
I did
door.
that, and then you feel,
Clear him.
you know, what that's supposed to feel like, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's the limit. So then the other thing I like about the sim is that, you know, you're racing with a bunch of, honest to Christ, mostly amateurs, especially in these kind of fun series where it doesn't count towards iRating or anything like that. So you're dealing with
Still out there.
unpredictable amateur human beings
Still out there.
trying to wheel
Clear
around
outside.
a highly advanced race car at 212 miles an hour. You know, that's what you're getting. So one of the things that it does, and it trains you to do, is it trains your he gone. It trains and hones your situational awareness, especially in Indy cars. You know,
Inside.
because everything
Still
in
there.
Indy cars happens
Clear
really
on the
in a split
bottom.
second. And you have to be able to predict that. You have to be able to see what's happening. Just like that right there. I know that's a DW12. I know he's massively faster than I am. There is no reason to cut down on him. Because A, he's probably an amateur. 2, he's probably in over his head in this car. And 3, there's no point. Because he's going to win anyway. So you don't force him into a bad situation.
In front of you.
And then it also teaches you accident avoidance. Like that. Like looking through the corner. Unless you're Jason Wells. I'm still sorry about that. But it does. It hones your situational awareness. And that's just one of the things that I really take away from it. You know. But if there's something else you don't know about the iRacing and things like that, one of the biggest draws and one of the biggest selling points of this software is that when they go to a track, they laser scan everything. It is so accurate, the laser scanning, is that they can tell the difference in the layers of paint. So like if you ever see like one of their raw track scans, all the stripes and everything like that actually show up
Inside quarter.
as data points. So you can actually see it. It's
Still
actually
there.
pretty neat. So every bump, everything, every seam is modeled.
Outside, outside.
So what they've
That's
done
your door
now,
outside.
over probably about 2 years ago, they
Still there.
introduced a
Clear if you need
little
it.
bit of understeer here. They introduced a new surface model, which takes into consideration, well, let's say, first of all, it started off as a static track. The temps never changed. The track temperature never changed. Rubber buildup never changed or anything like that. It was, however, it was whenever you first started it. Started the session, rather. And then what they did is they compounded their technology of how the tires interact with the track, and they said, hey, let's make the tires heat up the track, and just like regular race cars do. So that's what they did. So now, like, you can get multiple grooves. A groove will get rubbered in. See?
Working the bottom inside.
Coming inside.
Still inside.
Something else too.
About 20
Now
laps to
that
go.
you hear my, I think
Still
you hear my
there.
sponsor or my spotter. I hope you
Clear.
do. But that was one other thing that, you know, in street socks and stuff like that, especially racing at Sands, like, we didn't really have spotters. So that I'm used to that extra auditory, sensory input, where I think there could be some people that you know, it takes some time to get used to a spotter, because, like, you know, you're on the edge as far as driving the car to its limits. You're listening for stuff. You're trying to process all of this sensory input, and adding a guy or girl, whoever, screaming in your ear, giving you situations of what's going on around you, could be frustrating. So in the sim, you have spotters, and so you get used to that extra sensory inputs. It's not sensory anymore. It's actually a very helpful thing. So, like, whenever you get into a real race car and things like that, and you start getting spotters and interacting with them and things like that, and having that input, it was pretty natural. It was a very natural transition to add that. So, you know, people are like, it's just a guy racing, it's just a game. What can you possibly gain from that? What can you possibly see, or that has no translation into the real world or anything like that. Like, there's nothing you can learn in this game that, or the simulator, that will help you in the real world. And I'm going to tell you, as somebody who started off on this thing and transitioned to real world racing, that is absolutely false. There is a massive amounts of things that carry over between this and the real world. Obviously, you know, when you crash a car, you're not going to get hurt. Obviously, whenever you crash a car, you don't have to pay for it. So that stuff aside, which was relatively obvious. I mean, most of the stuff does, as far as like racecraft and vehicle dynamics and setting up a car and all this other kind of stuff. It all comes across both things, real world and this. So that's about it. I don't think I'm going to be able to get past this guy. I haven't really been saving tires either. I've just been sending it. If you look down here in the lower left corner, you can see all the control inputs and everything like that. You can see speed, what gear you're in, etc., etc. Green's gas, red's brake, and then there's one further to the left that's the clutch that you don't really use. That is aero push. And as the right side tires wear out, is that boobs on the side of that dude's car? That's hilarious. As that wears out, the aero push becomes much more prominent and everything like that. So in these cars, like especially these winged open wheel cars, you need clean air. And
Got
so
10 laps to go.
you learn to hunt for clean air and make a different lane or a line through the corner work. So like I said, it's the same thing in the real world, you know. Maybe one lane isn't working that night, and you got to try something else. Try a different line. So in the comments, somebody just ship piled it. So in the comments or anything like that, just let me know how the stream looks and everything. What you think of the overlay. It was a free download from someplace, so I didn't like steal it, and I sure as hell didn't make it. I'm not that talented. Just let me know how the stream looks. Ooh, got a little squirrely. So as he came back down over my nose and changed the airflow over the car, the ascent actually got really squirrely and it wanted to snap around. And a real quick aside about equipment. The different levels of equipment you can buy
Cars in front of you.
give you different feedback. So the simulator provides the force feedback. Anything that you would feel in the car coming through the steering column, it puts through your steering wheel that you buy. And there's some really high-end steering wheels, and then there's some middle-of-the-road steering wheels and
5
things
laps
like
to
that.
go.
But the big deal is that the power of the motor allows you to feel more stuff. So the motor the steering wheel that I have is probably one of the highest end wheels that you can buy, and it's actually probably commercial grade. So what you would find like in a NASCAR simulator or an F1 simulator, things like that, it's probably the same motor that they have in there. Not the exact same, but it's like the same level of quality and technology. Let's see the rear end. The right rear is going away. Boobs. So
2 more laps, 2 more hard ones,
I mean, you got to deal with these lap cars and stuff like that, and yay.
Outside. Clear high.
And, you know, like I said, racecraft there. You know, do you just send it? No, of course not, because he has to turn shit. Like I said, the right rear was going, and I'm too busy BS, and I didn't catch it quick
Coming
enough.
to the white flag this time.
And then you make the tires angry. As you can see, car just wants to spin out now.
Congrats, Eugene.
Oh, by the way, fixed setups suck. That's just weird.
Outside. Clear high.
But at any rate, that's iRacing. So I'm gonna
Sit, check a flag.
do, if there's actually anybody watching,
Well done, my
I'm gonna
friend.
go
Well
into
done.
the late models. I'm gonna go into a late model, open up a late model session, and show you coming in hot. and show you some of all the setup and garage stuff. What I'm talking about, like how things move over. Actually, I'll go into the super late because that's pretty much what we race.
Pretty good save there, Scott.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, the rear end went away right there at the end.
And I thought, I got to go to the inside and I'd open the door so much for him, I almost crashed doing it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was fun racing with you. So you okay? So like I said, most people on here are actually really nice.
I kind of pinched it down one time.
Oh no, man! I kind of figured that was going to be your normal line through there. So I lifted. It's all good, man. It was fun. Okay, so like you can see the tire temps here. Like I said, 245, the right rear started getting really, really squirrely. You can see there's too much camber in it because you can see the tire wear down here. So that's why the rear end started going away. And really there's not a lot of camber in the damn thing, but whatever. But so you can see like what you feel in a car translates to when you come into the garage and you take tire temps just like at the regular racetrack. You come in, check your tire temps and see what the car is doing, then you can come back into the chassis section of the thing and you can make adjustments. You can't now because this is what they call a fixed race, which essentially means you just kind of show up and drive. It's kind of like a fun kind of a session and things like that. But so that's how that works. But in some of the series, most of the series, well, not most, but a lot of the series, it's open setups, which means you have to adjust your own car. So, here we are. No one said anything. I'm talking to myself. No one is watching. But it will be saved. So, yay. All right. So let's go. Where's the super late at? Super late. So you come in, you can look at the super late and things like that. This is probably more advanced than what we race it. This is probably more along the lines like the Tundra series and things like that, if I had to take a guess. It's a bigger motor than what we're allowed to have. No. That's about the same size motor we're allowed to have. We're at max 357, but it's ballpark. But this chassis is much wider than what we have. We're 66 inches, if I'm not mistaken, and things like that. But let's try the actual late models, see what that does. Car info. Maybe this is closer to what we race. No. We're in the middle. I don't know where they got these race cars from, but at any rate, let's go to the back to super late at go to fly flags at night. That's always fun. The late model that they have modeled here, it's an older late model, very old, probably 2003, 2005, and they did not have bump stops or any kind of travel limiters or bump springs or whichever. So when you come down to the super late, they do. So I'll show you that some of the stuff in the garage really does transfer directly to the real world stuff. Five Flag Speedway, home of the Snowball Derby. Let's toss something in here. iRacing provides baseline setups just to give you a starting point, so you don't have to come in from scratch. As you can see, to your different tire pressures, your staggers. You can choose individual staggers front to back. So you can come in, you can move your ballast back and forth. So that concept of what ballast does in a race car, you know, that's, you get exposed to that. You see exactly what it is. You can get different steering boxes. The steering offset is simply just pulling your steering wheel off and put it back on at a different position. Brake balance, you know, you start learning what the heck that is, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can come up here with your sway bars and things, and you can learn what all this stuff does before you even go out. So when you come down, this is essentially your jack screws, the spring purchase. Jack screws or your adjusting collar. You can throw different springs in there. Here's your bump springs and your packers. And then you can even get down into adjusting your shocks. So the big issue that iRacing knows about is that the software runs at, I believe, 60 cycles a second. That's just the speed that the software gets processed. But the shocks, they're not exactly accurate because the velocity that a shock moves in and out, up and down, especially the high velocity movement of a shock, it requires the sim to run at a faster rate. I think somebody said like 360 or something like that, 360 cycles per second, just to get it so that they could actually model the shocks 100% accurately or close to 100% accurately. But right now they work relatively good. They make the changes that you would expect them to change. So camber, caster, you can set your toe, set your ratios and everything like that. And here's another one, track bar height. You know, this one's hillbilly. Don't know why it's hillbillied, but it is. So, you know, when you get into it, you learn what all of this stuff does, and it's all the same stuff that's in a real race car. It's just the amount of change you make in here, what it feels like in the sim. You have to relearn how much change the real car needs to feel the change that you're looking for, the handling characteristic change. Like last year, whenever I was helping Molly's little brother with his car, you know, and I was making changes on the car and giving suggestions and things like that, you know, like I was making minor changes, like things that were almost imperceivable, you know. So you go and you ask, you know, some of the experienced folks, they're like, what's the car doing? What changes do you think you should make? I would say this, and they would say that's nowhere near enough. And they were like triple what I would suggest or what I had in mind. It's like, holy crap, that's a lot. But so that's the transition kind of stuff that you need to learn between the two, real world and the sim. So the foundation is there. Don't need telemetry again. The similarity is there between the two, so there's a lot of carryover between everything. So like when people are like, oh, you need to, what's your track bar at? You know, and they say, do this with your track bar. You can say, oh, I know what changes that should do as far as the handling goes. Wow. Oh, and then the one thing with the setups that iRacing gives you, they push like dump trucks. So like you really can't get on it. Oh, there you go. Just need a little bit of heat in the tire. But so when people say like, talk to me about iRacing and things like that, and how it helps in real world racing and different things like that, or is it worth it, or something along those lines, the amount of experience and as far as familiarity goes the exposure, I should say, that you can get to racing cars and setting up cars and vehicle dynamics and racecraft and decision making on the track and making sure you look past your hood pins down the track and whatnot. All of that majorly important stuff is here. It's all here. And back to the realism in a race. I'm sitting in my computer room, but after about, I don't know, it's easier for me now since I've been doing it so long just to like let myself slip into the simulation. After about 5 or 6 laps of racing anywhere, you forget that you're not in a real car. You forget it. And as I was saying, the higher the quality of equipment that you have, the more realistic of an experience that you can get. And like right now, my arms are fatigued. I've only been going around this thing for 10 laps, and I am fatigued. 8 laps. My arms are fatigued already. And Molly can tell you that after one of my league races in Lionheart, the Indy car does not have power steering, and so I have it accurately set up so the force feedback that you feel in an Indy car is coming through this wheel that I'm manipulating. So by the end of a race, I'm drenched in sweat, just from the mental effort that it takes, and because I got fortunate enough to be able to invest in good equipment, the experience is there. So at any rate, that's it. It's almost time to go to work, but take it back into pits. Does anybody know if they animated the pit crews for these yet or no? I know they did it for the Gen 6 cars, but no, I don't think they did. No, they didn't. The Gen 6 cars are pretty cool. But so, yeah, there's a car. Neat. But then you can come back into the garage and you can see, much more 10 degrees hotter up on the right front than the right rear. And so the car was pushing, which it was. And just like in the real world, I mean, drivers in here, they prefer one thing over another. They prefer a snug car. Somebody prefer a free car. Somebody prefers a neutral car. Some drivers, and this is the big thing that is a byproduct of the simulator and no death, no money, or anything like that, is that you can make an inherently unstable setup fast. You just have to learn how to drive it and learn how to control it. So in the sim, you can make one of those setups, and then you can just practice over and over and over and over and over again, and then you can be super fast. We call those people aliens, because like normal everyday users of the system, with the amount of practice that we can normally put in, there's no way that you can control that car. So that's the only thing that kind of sucks about the sim and things like that, where you can put a setup in a car that you're never gonna race ever and make it work. So that's one thing. The other thing that they're working on now is the tires don't fail. They just haven't gotten to that point of development where what we're running into now, as far as an inherently unstable setup, is these massive camber settings that some drivers on here are using, where in the real world they would blow up. The tires would fail after 10 laps, 15 laps. But since they don't fail, you can just make them work in here. So there was a big dust up about that, because nobody really thought that people would do that. People, it's just one of those things. Like it's still software, and people are still going to figure out where the weaknesses are and what they can take advantage of, you know, as far as being able to win races and be fast. Just like the real world, just here it's just software. So that's what they're doing. And so the new tire model is supposed to address that, and hopefully we'll take that away. What they're doing now is they're removing ride heights. They're limiting the amount of ride height you can start with, because as you know, with the upper control arm and the lower control arms and things like that, you can dial in X amount of camber, and as the nose of the car squats, it inherently, the geometry of the suspension actually pulls the tire down and increases the camber even more. So that's how people are getting away with it. So they limit the ride height, the max ride height that you can put in, and they limit the static camber that you can dial into the tires, just to stave that off. Because there's a lot of people that they don't want to race that kind of a setup, because it's not fun to drive. It's not a fun experience. It's not realistic. So in an effort as a stopgap, they're limiting how the ride heights go, how high the ride heights can go to begin with, and they're limiting the amount of static static camber you can dial into the car. But other than that, as I've been saying, the simulator is exactly that. Carl Edwards has a funny story. They put him in this thing, and he was driving around the track, and okay, it was time to come into the pits, and he instinctively put his hand up to let everybody know that he was going to the pits, and he was and he's like, wait a second, I'm not an actual car. But so like I said, it's realistic. So if anybody, you guys ever come over the house, or you know somebody who's on iRacing, stop over their house and put them in a rig, and let them, ask them to use their thing and let you turn laps. But other than that, it is time for me to get ready to go to work. So all right, thanks, guys, have a good one.